Okay, so she then talks a bit about the implications of this for how we think about the flood, talked about in Genesis 6 through 9. I think you can read that on your own, but part of the idea again would be um, the debates about a universal flood. Um, well, basically, she says in the middle of page 19, the area around these seas, the Black or Mediterranean seas, would have been the world of the biblical writers. According to young Earth creationists, the Genesis flood laid down millions of layers of sediment across the planet. Because of this sediment, with its land and sea animal fossils, say young Earth. I'm going to say can't answer right now. The Earth merely appears to be millions of years old, according to the young Earth creationist thing. By the way, the evidence for the age of the Earth, when calculated by several different scientific measures, they always come pretty close to saying the same thing, which is in the billions years of age, 4 to 5 billion years old. And again, we're faced kind of with a question: do we decide to trust what the natural sciences seem very strongly to be telling us about our planet and its place in the solar system and galaxy and universe, or the young Earth creationist approach, which is basically predicated on kind of working with the genealogies in the Bible to figure out, how many years from Adam to the present. The most traditional aging, some of you might know, is actually pretty exact, 4004 BC. That was developed by an Anglican bishop, Bishop Ussher, I think in the 18th century. But again, if the Bible isn't written to supply us that kind of information, it's probably ill-advised to think that we could do some work in the genealogies and piece together how old the Earth is. But those would be sort of the youngest. The youngest now would be about 6,000 years old. And I know not all young Earth creationists think it's 6. I think some young Earth creationists go up to like 10,000 years. Either way, though, it's very young in comparison with what the natural sciences would tell us. Again, once, just to speak for myself, once I came to understand, and it took a while, it was gradual, the process of saying the Bible's purpose really isn't kind of scientific like that. The Bible is a testimony. The Bible is testifying in many different ways. Or we say the people of Israel, through the scriptures, were testifying about the Creator, and by that they meant their God. The God of Israel is not just the God of Israel, but the God of all things. This gives me a chance then to talk about something that isn't in Winslow's essay, and I love her essay, but I did include it in my accompanying, notes. So I expect you to read those carefully. Without pulling it up myself now, I'll just say that the list of comparisons I do between Genesis 1 and Genesis 2 are very important. Winslow spends basically all her time on Genesis 1, which is fine. Another way to look at this is, in my judgment, along with many other people, I won't say all people, but the grand majority of scholars, both biblical and theological, are convinced, as am I, that we have two distinct creation stories at the very front end of our Bible. Basically, Genesis 1 and 2, although the first story actually ends probably early in chapter 2, remembering that the chapters and verses, all of that was added much later to the original text, and that's fine. It doesn't really hurt anything, other than in this case we might say, well, they would have been better to take chapter 1 a little bit farther. Most scholars believe that the first story goes through chapter 2, verse 4, and not even all of verse 4. It's like verse 4, first half. And then a distinctly different story, and you can tell the differences right away, starts in the second half of verse 4 of chapter 2 of Genesis. Those two stories, for my money, and I'm not alone in thinking this, that the earlier of the two is the second one. So the one that starts, roughly in chapter 2 is believed to have been the older story of beginnings. So this is the one where you have, Adam all alone, and God creates the animals to see if there's a partner that would work for this poor, lonely human. And Adam names the creatures, but none of these creatures seem to really fit with the human as a partner. So then God subsequently creates the woman, essentially by dividing the man, or dividing the human, with the implication being that the original human was, more or less androgynous, that the woman is taken out from the side. It isn't just like a rib that then, it's more the idea that I think that this human is in some ways, made into male and female. Now, by the way, again, in Genesis 1, this other story that was very likely written later, you start with Adam. Adam, it means humanity or human in Hebrew. And Adam is from the beginning, male and female. It isn't like there's this lonely one creature, but rather there's male and female from the beginning. Reproduction is assumed. All the other creatures are also made male and female. So it isn't like the woman comes as an afterthought, as it appears to be in Genesis 2. That's one of many differences. You look at those lined up side by side, and while, of course, not everybody agrees, the grand majority of biblical and theological scholars, of whom I am one, would argue and believe that the story that begins our Bible, in Genesis 1, was likely written roughly during the time of Israel's exile, the exile of the people of Israel into Babylon. Of course, not all the people, but the elite, the scholars, the wealthy, the cream of the crop, taken to Babylon, probably with the hopes that they would be absorbed into Babylonian culture and maybe contribute to that culture. And undoubtedly many Jews did that, but not all did. And I would suggest to you that Genesis 1 is a document that was maybe evolved. Who knows how long it took to write it, but it looks to me like it might have been sung, that it might actually even be a hymn with the chorus line something like, "And God saw that it was good." So you have that over and over again, right? Remember, now if this is correct, we're talking about a document, a hymn, a poem, written in the circumstance of exile, where it would have been easy for Jews to say, this is not good. My goodness, who in the world is... I'm not that important. Leave me alone. Message. Stop. Leave me alone. Okay. Now, I really like this idea for the fact that I shared this with one of you I know after class the other day. I can easily imagine Genesis 1 either being recited like sort of a recited prayer together, or maybe even sung, or maybe a combination. Like, and it would be on the Sabbath day. Remember that Genesis 1 story ends with the Sabbath day as the big deal. That's kind of where it culminates. And so Jews in exile who were trying to maintain their Jewish identity, faith, commitments, meeting together, maybe in a synagogue of some kind, or synagogues in Babylon, where the great temptation would be just to, be absorbed into Babylonian culture and society and religion. And so here you have Genesis 1 as a call, a liturgical, which means worship-oriented, a liturgical call to the people of Israel to worship their God as the creator of all things. Now, remember that their God looks like their God lost when the Babylonians came in and destroyed the temple, took away, again, the Jewish elite. It doesn't look good for, like the God of Israel. The Babylonian gods apparently have a lot of power. So Genesis 1 is a resistance. It's a document intended to inform the Jewish people's lives with a devotion to the creator of all things, including the Babylonians. Okay? And I'm going to pause on this one. I'll come back and talk about these things a little bit more, including some things that aren't really in any of your materials.